The zombie debt scam explained. Banks create money out of thin air. When you borrow money from a bank, they don't have all the money in accounts ready to loan out. They only need 1/10 of what they loan out. 9/10 of the money is just created out of thin air. So people pay back something that was never actually borrowed in the first place. When someone can't keep up payments on a loan or a credit card, catalogue debts, and other debts of that nature, quite often the bank or the loan company will sell the debt on to a debt purchase company and claim on their insurance and tax for the money that they haven't managed to collect for that particular account. The debt buyers will pay pennies in the pound for the debt, about 12% of the face value of what is claimed is owed on the account, and they'll just buy a bulk load of user data, which is effectively just a list of names with associated numbers of alleged outstanding balances for those accounts. The debt buyers will then send a notice of assignment of the debt to the debtor and attempt to collect the full value of the debt and not the 12% that they actually paid for it. Many people fall victim to this scam every year and end up paying the full debt that was never owed to the debt buyer and was written off by the original creditor. When you buy an item from a shop, you can show that you own that item that you have bought because you've got a receipt for that item. Well, the debt buyer is no different. They need a sale agreement from the original creditor to prove that they actually own that debt. And when it comes to companies dealing with other companies, what they need under the Law of Property Act 1925 is a deed of assignment. Because the debt buyer was so busy buying debts in bulk, they never got hold of. One of the best ways of challenging the debt buyer is by using the three-letter process. This gives the debt buyer ample opportunity to provide the original contract with the original creditor, and more importantly the deed of assignment that would be needed to transfer ownership of that agreement to the debt buyer. This is one document that we know they cannot produce because they've simply brought a big list of names and numbers that are not really associated to anything. Any proof they need to run back to the original creditor. The three stages of the three-letter process are conditional acceptance, non-response, and irrevocable estoppel. We accept the debt if they can prove it's owed by producing the deed of assignment and all the other documents like the original contract that they should have by law in their possession, which they never do. The non-response, when they fail to provide those documents, is sent 14 days after the first letter, and then when they, after a further 14 days, fail to provide those documents, a notice of irrevocable estoppel is sent, and that draws a line under the matter as far as we're concerned. These letters can then be used in any court of law to defend any action that the debt buyer might bring. The debt buyer quite often scrambles around, contacts the original creditor, tries to get hold of the original contract and details of the outstanding balance on the original account. But one thing that they can't get is the deed of assignment, which is required by law for them to own the debt legally. And all they can come up with excuses as to why they will not show that document to you. They'll say it's a commercially sensitive document and it contains the names and addresses of other people. So they claim under the Data Protection Act it would breach their data protection to show you the deed of assignment. This is clearly nonsense. All the debt buyer has is a list of names with account numbers, one of which might be your alleged debt. But if it was a valid deed of assignment, they could simply cross out all the other names and provide the document that showed they had a valid deed of assignment for your account and prove that the debt was actually owed to the debt buyer. Quite often, when challenged early with the three-letter process, the debt buyer will just close the account, realising that the game is up and that you know they don't really own the debt. The debt is a zombie debt. If the debt buyer doesn't close the accounts and zero the debt and keeps on harassing you, you can just report them to the Financial Conduct Authority for harassment, and that will normally stop a debt buyer from harassing you. The next step then, the only step for them then, if they want to carry on pursuing the debt, is to take the matter to court. Many people can be taken to court by debt buyers without even realising it, as a debt buyer will buy a zombie debt that could have been owed at a previous address many years before, and the person was just not kept up with mail from that address, and the zombie debt buyer will just run to the court and get a CCJ in default without even the opportunity for you to defend the claim. If that happens, you'll be in the position of having to make an application to the court to have a judgment set aside. If you already have a CCJ, before you can challenge it, you'll need to have the judgment set aside using an N244 form. And you can file this with your local county court. The charge for making this application is £100 if you were given the CCJ without you receiving the claim form. So if it was sent to an old address, you pay £100 for the application. If you received the claim form and did nothing, then the application fee is £255. You can file an EX160 form for help with costs of any court application. If you've just received a claim form, you should acknowledge service. This gives you an extra 14 days to file a defence, and then file a defence well within the time limit. If you don't acknowledge service of the claim form, you will get a CCJ in default within 14 days. So it is important to acknowledge service, then file a defence. A good defence has been listed in the information section of the video. The key points in the defences are Section 1(3) of the Law of Property, Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1989. A deed must be witnessed if it is signed by one person. Section 44 of the Companies Act 2006. A deed requires the signature of 2 directors or a director and a secretary. The Regulatory Reform, Execution and Deeds and Documents Order 2005. A deed needs 2 signatures. Section 136 of the Law of Property Act 1925. There needs to be a sale agreement in writing at the underhand of the assignor. And Section 196 of the Law of Property Act 1925. Notice should be served by registered mail. Challenged on these points, a debt buyer has little other option than to admit that they do not have a valid deed of assignment. They simply have a list of names and numbers that equate to perhaps an equitable assignment which is not enforceable in a court of law without attaching the original creditor, and most cases will fall apart when presented with this kind of defence. Join us on Beat the Bailiffs on Facebook to beat the zombie debt buyers for good.